Hello and welcome to our 7-8 minutes of weekly Torah talk. Our guest today is Rabbi Craig Marantz of Emmanuel Congregation in Chicago. Hello, Rabbi. Thank you for being with us.
Shmuel, it is a pleasure and a blessing. Greetings to you and shalom, shalom.
Our parsha is VaEra, and in this parsha Moshe and Aaron repeatedly come before Pharaoh to demand, "Let my people go." Pharaoh repeatedly refuses. Aaron's staff turns into a snake and swallows the magic sticks of the Egyptian sorcerers. God then sends a series of plagues upon the Egyptians. The first 7 are counted in our parsha. The waters of the Nile turn to blood, swarms of frogs over on the land, lice infest all men and beasts, hordes of wild animals invade the cities, a pestilence kills the animals, painful boils afflict the Egyptians, and for the 7th plague, fire and ice combine to descend from the heavens as a devastating hail. The first pasuk of the parsha says, "Vaydaber Elohim el Moshe vayomer elav ani Adonai." God spoke to Moses and he said to him, "I am the Lord." So Rabbi, it is all about God speaking to Moses, who then has to speak to Pharaoh. But do they really communicate?
You know, Shmuel, I think the challenge in this parsha is that God and Moses want to communicate with one another. They want to get on the same page with one another, but they struggle. And I think the struggle is ultimately a function of how they listen to one another. In Parashat VaEra, God calls Moses to approach Pharaoh and to tell Pharaoh to let the children of Israel go. This is well known. And then, of course, Moses appeals to God, wondering how it is that Pharaoh is going to listen to him, primarily because, in Moses' mind, he is a man of uncircumcised lips, of impeded speech.
Right.
Now, this is not the first time that Moshe Rabbeinu has expressed concern about his speech. And God doesn't respond compassionately, does he? He gets angry with Moses.
Right.
And yeah, so it strikes me that God's anger in this case couldn't have helped Moses that much, right? Because according to the Midrash, how many times, or how many days rather, does it take Moses to really approach the burning bush?
Well,
7 days.
I don't know. You'll tell me. 7 days. Okay.
Right. 7 days to approach the burning bush. In part, it's because he's shy about how he speaks and how he communicates. But that's not the only thing. That's not the only thing, because we learn from Rashi that perhaps Moshe is reluctant to approach the burning bush because intuitively he understands that he's called to leadership, or will be called to leadership, and he fears that any leadership he may assume may ultimately undermine his brother Aaron. And why is he worried about that? Because Aaron is actually older. He's the one, because he's older, that should be called to leadership.
Well, it's not the first time. It's not the first time in the Torah when we see 2 brothers and the younger brother is assuming a more senior position than the older brother.
That's true, and Genesis has a very powerful commitment to that narrative. Except here, Moses is different than his forebears. He's different than his founding fathers. Why is that? Well, there are a lot of reasons. Perhaps he's more virtuous. Perhaps he loves his brother more than those forefathers loved their own brothers. But the point is that the animus that marks the relationships between our forefathers in Genesis and their siblings is not the same for how Moses looks to his brother. He likes Aaron. He respects Aaron. And it seems to me, if the wisdom of the Midrash carries, a compassionate God who has already heard the cry of the Israelites, why God has brought Moses to bear. God is compassionate. God is full of chesed. God has heard the cry and wants to respond. And it's probably perplexed as to why it's so difficult to get Pharaoh to change his tune. Speaking of poor listening, Pharaoh's not listening well either, nor are the people for that matter. Nobody's listening, and nobody's reaching each other where they're really at. And it makes it hard for communication to go forward. It makes it hard for Moses and God to be on the same page.
Do we see in this parsha someone who's better at communicating his will and someone else who is a lesser of a communicator? Is God doing a decent job communicating himself to Moshe? Is Moshe doing a good job communicating himself to Pharaoh? I guess what I'm asking is, do we see a problem more with the speaker or more with the listener?
Well, I think the answer is really yes to both. With respect to God, now God is the leader. And it seems to me that God is calling on Moses to step up and to assume this important role of leadership, human leadership, in this freedom story. And so the challenge we have is that Moses has either an insecurity about how he communicates or a particular virtue that he wants to support his brother's leadership and not undermine it. Seems to me that God doesn't hear this. And because God needs this field general to support this cause and to support the redemption of the Israelites, instead of hearing Moses where he's really at, God then doubles down. I will save you. I will take you to be my people. I will catapult you to freedom.
Right, the five languages of redemption.
Yes, the languages of redemption he brings to bear. So all of which I think are legitimate, but it doesn't reflect that God is really listening well.
And would you say the same thing about Pharaoh? Can Moshe do a better job communicating the severity of the situation to Pharaoh by way of convincing him to cut shorter the period of suffering of the Egyptians before they let the Israelites go?
Well, so Moses must cut through Pharaoh's bias that he must enslave these people that live in fear of them being free. Unless Moses can cut through that bias, I don't believe Pharaoh can ever listen carefully enough to Moses, can never hear the urgency in Moses' voice from the cry of the Israelites. I don't think he's redeemable unless he learns to listen better. So that's his choice. If Pharaoh were to listen to the urgent cry of Moses and the Israelites that we need to be free and that living under slavery does not give us an opportunity to realize our full humanity, that if he doesn't hear that, if he cannot understand that, then his heart will continue to harden. And I'm not sure there's anything Moses can do beyond making that message clear, or just to leave like they do.
Right, so speak softly and carrying a big stick. In this case, they must use the stick before the soft speaking can enter Pharaoh's heart.
Yeah, I think there's some people just refuse to listen. I think, what do we do with all this ancient wisdom as we try to make our way forward in our own lives? Shmiat Ozen is a virtue. It's a midah. To listen attentively is a key virtue. And it requires a certain amount of humility and self-recognition that sometimes we possess biases that make it really hard for us to listen to other people, particularly other people who have perspectives that are different or perspectives with which we disagree. Requires us to recognize that maybe we don't know all the truth, that there are other truths that we have to bear witness to. And to bear witness ultimately is to do what? Shema Yisrael, right? To listen, to hear.
Rabbi, thank you. Thank you so much, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom to you too, Shmuel. Very nice to meet you. Naim Meod.